Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to all as we gather here for an enlightening leadership lecture series. We are excited to have you all join us for this amazing lecture that promises insights and inspiration. Today, I am eager to introduce you to Mr. Dinesh, a very successful entrepreneur who has also founded and created multi-billion-dollar businesses. He is the founder and chairman of TVS Supply Chain Solutions, which today employs over 18,000 people across the world with presence in over 25 countries. Mr. Dinesh also leads KI Mobility Solutions, which is the largest automated aftermarket digital platform in India and offers integrated aftermarket services through an online to offline model. He also took over as president of Confederation of Indian Industries for the fiscal year 23-24 and is also the chairman of the CII Institute of Logistics and CII Family Business Network India Chapter Council. So, ladies and gentlemen, with great honor, let us all welcome our speaker, Mr. R. Dinesh.
Good evening, everybody. As always, delighted to be part of an younger audience because it's something which gives you greater energy than speaking with people who are of my age. So, thank you for having me here. I think the purpose of coming here initially was to see what partnerships CII can have with the institution, which I think we will take up separately. But I was told to speak about entrepreneurship and, of course, obviously share my own learnings in the best manner possible. I want to make it as much interactive as I can, so I won't talk for too long at the initial bit and then throw it open for thoughts, questions, comments, criticisms from all of you, right? Critiques from all of you. So, first question for me is, how do we actually define an entrepreneur? And how do we define entrepreneurship? People tend to think of being an entrepreneur as actually having their own business. But unfortunately, in reality, nobody has their own business ever, right? You have too many stakeholders with whom you start dealing with, and therefore the way I would define entrepreneurship or entrepreneur is somebody who actually creates value for oneself and value for others. And that actually is a very, very big responsibility which you start with. And that's why typically it becomes very difficult to take that risk when you start emerging early on in life. But having said that, if I look at myself, in a way I was privileged because I was part of a family, a very large business family at that time. But the challenge before me was, the question before me was, am I going to live off the brand or am I going to do something to build value to the brand? And that's when this thought of trying to do something new came. Fortunately or unfortunately, I didn't have this personal brand of an education background which allowed me to come in here because I was a chartered accountant and not a IIT Madras person to say that, I have that badge. As I was mentioning to somebody, I have come to this campus many times because three of my school students, classmates were actually staying here, and of course finally they didn't get into engineering careers. One of them became a financial investor, another became a partner in a firm, and the third one of course did his own business. So each of them had different careers. But why I'm sharing that is, a brand becomes very important as you build a value for oneself. What you actually do is finally what matters when it comes to how you're going to be evaluated 20 years from now or 30 years from now when you start doing your own business. But if I then define an entrepreneur as somebody who is going to create value for oneself, and like I said, if I then relate it to my journey, the first learning I will look at it as true value is learning, right? Learning in every manner possible. So for me, the way I would look at it is and define success is being humble in terms of being willing to learn from one's mistakes, willing to listen to others, but at the same time, if you just listen to all of the warnings they gave you, you will take no risk in life, right? So you have to make sure that you have the courage and the conviction and I would call it the will to be able to fight against the, so to say, all the risks which you are going to face in whatever journey you do. But I think the first and foremost point I would like to stress is what is the mindset of one, and not the mindset of saying I want to have my own business, therefore I am being an entrepreneur. In fact, I would say the biggest success of most people have been where they have actually worked in an organization, learned to be what I would call as an entrepreneur, meaning they are an internal person, but actually start thinking of the organization and the value which they are going to create for that organization as they work through that process. And that actually sets the mindset or the ability for one to be able to be ready to take on an entrepreneurship role and create value for oneself. So it doesn't necessarily mean, again I repeat, that one is looking at owning a business or starting a business as being the reason as to being an entrepreneur. The second biggest challenge which I actually see when you look at this definition is that what is the real value are we going to create? I think if you look at the slew of, I would call it, new age startups, most of them start trying to slice and dice a problem into basic solutions and then try to find, problems into very small bits and then trying to find a solution for it. But the best solution or the best way to really look at an entrepreneur role would be to look at the problem as a whole. And if you look at our case, because we came in late into the logistics sector, we said that we are not going to be looking at the business at all. We are going to be looking at the customer. And once you start looking at the customer in the entirety, we realize that what we need to do is to be able to provide the best solution for that customer and not worry about what business I am doing. So the challenge of, in a way, starting businesses is that which angle are you coming to look at this starting the business. The first problem is, am I doing it for the right reasons? Am I going to create value for myself? Am I going to create value for others who are going to be involved in this business? When I mean others, it includes the customer. When I mean others, it includes every stakeholder who is going to be involved with you, whether it be the investor or any other person with whom we work with. And if you look at all of the journeys of all of these startups, at some point of time, they either scale up significantly or they decide that they are going to fold up into a much larger entity. So by itself, there is nothing wrong in that. That's why I keep repeating, entrepreneurship is not about ownership. Entrepreneurship is about how you manage a business. Are we creating value for ourselves and everybody else? As you become part of this journey with a larger base, there is two types of people whom I have seen. One who actually say, I can get folded into a larger organization as long as I am given the freedom to make happen. I'll give you my own example. When we first started looking at our business, we said the capabilities were lying in overseas markets. We didn't have the money to go and buy. And just to tell you so that you have an idea of the numbers, you may think, oh, TVS family, we started with a big capital. I was actually given 3 lakhs as equity. And from 1997 to 2008, the total funding available was 3 lakhs. But we still made acquisitions, so to say, on because of the fact that we were a profitable business from day one, and we could afford to go ahead and make that happen because that's where the brand did add value. You could borrow a little bit of money. But having said that, what we learned was that if you acquired another company which had certain inherent capabilities, the biggest advantage you actually get is if you retain those people, use their talent, and actually build your business using that. And that's what I said by being humble. Because if we think we know why we are acquiring that entity, then very soon you will end up losing that talent, and then it becomes very difficult to actually internalize that and build your business using that. So that's the one learning I would say I took away. As you build your business, make sure that you retain whomsoever you are working with, as long as they have the capability to help you grow. And at some point of time, they may become not relevant, but that's down the road. The second thing which we learned was, capital is actually not very difficult to get. Even today, in whatever you may be hearing about funding, winter, etc., capital is the easiest thing to get, provided you have a business model which is going to make everybody else profitable, meaning everybody else of creating value, and profitable not necessarily in terms of PBT or profit, but value creation for themselves. So as we, again, if I look at my own journey, I think we would have engaged in TVS supply chain with more than 11 startups. When I mean startups, people who started their own business and built to a certain scale, both using technology and other solutions which they brought into it and applied. And in each of those cases, we actually found, again, I'm repeating, that they became perfectly good employees of our organization, and some of them are there with us today after more than 14 years of selling their business. They became entrepreneurs because we continue to give them the freedom to experiment, to think as if they are owners, and they were owners of this organization. In fact, I repeated that publicly, that we actually were the first TVS company to give shares to people because we said that's the ownership attitude which we want from an approach perspective. So it is not scale, it is not going to be how you deal with them, rather than the fact that it's their own business with which they look at this. The fourth aspect of it is everybody looks at the business model. Everybody looks at what real value we are looking at it from the business model perspective. People forget that it is all about the people. All of us forget it is about people. So for me, that was the first learning, or the first mistake I made, was to look at the business model, forgetting I am going to have people who are going to be dealing with customers, dealing with other people who are part of this organization. So I would call it as the best learning for me was the humility to say that I made a mistake of not looking at people first. So as we built our business, people became the core of any solution which we looked at. Do we have the right set of people to be able to deliver that solution for what we define as a customer? The last example I would like to give is that as we looked at overseas, you did hear that more than 70% of our business is overseas. As we looked at the overseas market, we realized that there is a big strength from this Indian concept of looking at cost as being a primary criteria. When you get access to capital, you forget that. So always there is this frugal mindset has to come from that I am not going to have access to cash if I don't do the right thing today. It's today I may have the capital coming in, whatever crore of rupees or whatever has been invested. So when we got the first funding from Goldman Sachs, which was for me like heaven, because suddenly you brought 125 crores of equity into the company, I said that 125 crores of equity has to be used in the most frugal manner possible. So as we kept building our business, I would say till 2018, not even 1 year did we not have a return on capital which was higher than the cost of capital which we had taken into account. That frugality is what has stood us in good stead today because of the fact that we could scale up this business significantly. So for me, as a value creator, as we go down that business, as you start building scale in a business, first and foremost is got to be this approach of making sure that I am using every rupee, not just because I got access to that rupee, but I hope and make sure that I get a better return for that rupee spent than what I am going or what the investor is going to expect as a return for that investment. As we went down that journey, I have realized that if you make sure that you give enough return or enough cushion of return for each of your investors, you don't have any difficulty in being able to access cash. So if I step back and look at each step in my journey, and if I look at a different business model like e-mobility, which I think was briefly mentioned, it is a very different business model because that was an existing business of ours which we completely converted into a digital solution. So an offline business became an online business. And how did we do it? We partnered again with more than 7 startups. And we allowed that DNA of that startup to come into our organization so that we transformed from a 70-year-old business to being a day one business. So if you look at whichever method of approach you're looking at as an entrepreneur, if you're starting very small to having enough scale to be able to build a business and grow it to a next level, nothing changes. That's why, when Jeff Bezos keeps talking about day one, forget the day one analogy. Look at it as whatever I did on day one is relevant even today. It's not about speed of decision making, which we take away from that learning, but it is about thinking what is the right thing to do for every person who is going to be involved in that business, whether it is the person who put in the money, or it is a person who is helping you run the business, or it is somebody else who is supporting you in running that business. In fact, I will add that as we evolve that business model, we realize that if I'm going to do everything myself, I'm going to have the biggest challenge in terms of not requiring hundreds of crores of capital, but thousands of crores of capital. So we decided we will actually find partners whom we are not going to be investing in, whom we are going to trust, and whom we are going to use. But having said that, they become true and genuine partners where we will make sure they are profitable. So when we did that, you won't believe it, today we have about 30,000 trucks running in India alone, and not even one truck do I own. Right? So you can build that partnership approach as long as you bear in mind that you are creating value, and not just for yourself but for everybody else. The last comment I will finish with and then throw open to enable you to ask questions is that people tend to think of the real, so to say, basis is valuation of a business. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. It is the value creation of the business which builds the valuation. Short term, everybody will talk about valuation, but let me tell you, as you see today, every time there is a value decretion, people will really use it as the worst negative to beat you with. So rather than look at valuation, if we decide that value creation is going to be our goal, then you have the best chance of success as an entrepreneur. Forget startups. Like I said, every business you run, if you stop looking at valuation but look at the value creation you're doing for yourself and for others, then you have a chance of success, is how I would look at it. Just to give you some facts and numbers, when in 2004, when we became a separate company, we were about 14 crores in revenue. Today we are about 10,500 crores in revenue. When we got to this scale, I still remember my biggest fear was what's going to happen tomorrow. Why? Because your responsibility has now become 18,000 strong. Your partners, as I said, have become more than few thousands across the world. You have now a brand to worry about because you have built that brand and you have to think of how you are going to do. So today, as I am standing here and speaking to you, I am thinking, how do we make sure that tomorrow is better than today? And that's the reality of the tiger by the tail for every entrepreneur. As you build scale, that's why what happens typically is when you reach a certain level of scale, you either then become partner, or I would call it assimilate yourself with a larger company, then you find betterment. I know you should know the data, but I'll just repeat it. 99.6% of startups actually tend to sell out or become partners with other larger companies. Less than 5.5% actually reach a significant scale enough to become, so to say, fully driven and owner driven across the board. But as I said, all of us and all of them have taken money from somebody else. Therefore, the responsibility then becomes much, much, much bigger than just putting your own money at work. And like I said, if you want to build scale in business, you are never going to be an absolute owner in yourself. So let me stop here and feel free to ask any questions, any thoughts, any inputs.
I think if you look at supply chain or logistics, you mentioned your background was as a chartered accountant, so you perhaps didn't come from that as a domain. So same thing, I think, even if you look at all the students here, we're faced with this plethora of problems across domains and segments. So one question usually comes is, every problem is relevant. How do I go about choosing a domain that, so how did you go about choosing this as a domain? And what are some of the top business skills that the students here could really build up over a period of time to enable them, even if they don't come from a medical background or like a healthcare background or any of that, to build a business in that domain actually?
Of course, very, very relevant question. So in my mind, the way I would look at it is, you are never a subject matter expert to run a business. In fact, if you think you're a subject matter expert, then I would say don't run a business. Become a technocrat, right? The biggest challenge I have found is people come with a relevant background to that job, and therefore they never want to step out of their comfort zone. In fact, I'm talking all about the successes. So just before I started supply chain, I wanted to get into the IT space, and it was looked at as obviously at that time just starting but doing very well. And I thought I'm going to choose a beautiful niche and get into actually providing technology for it was not space startup, but it was like providing technology for very high-end technology solutions for satellites, etc. And in fact, we were very happy that the first order for us was signed by Mr. Abdul Kalam at that time. So thrilled. Run beautifully by technocrats. 5 years later, we never made money, right? Because what happens is, if you really look at pure technology or pure capability of a particular sector, to answer your question of saying I'm an expert in medical or I'm an expert in engineering, and therefore I'm going to stay comfortable with what I am doing, I forget that there are so many other aspects of business which I will need to cross apply, and therefore that becomes a big challenge. To your second question, I think the best learning for me in my life has been get to the root cause of an issue. Never look at the surface of what the problem is. And if you start looking at the root cause of every issue, you will actually find a solution there itself. And you can't still replace I would call it the 8D or the Kaizen approach of the Japanese, where you start with a problem and if you go to the root cause of it. So whether it be a financial issue, whether it be a marketing issue, whether it be a technology issue, and I'm saying this for a technology issue also, a digital solution does not replace that root cause. The digital solution actually makes that root cause. In fact, I very recently had the opportunity to meet with a Japanese CEO, and he was saying, I have this DX strategy, the digital strategy. So I said, what does the digital strategy do? It makes me more efficient. He's not talking about digitization actually making a new business model. He's saying digitization is all about making sure I'm more efficient. Therefore, actually the root cause analysis does not exclude any portion of our business. And if that is a mindset with which we look at a business, I think that's how we become successful. I'll just add with one more anecdote. I actually, until 12th standard, I was doing, maths, physics, chemistry. So I wanted to get into engineering. In fact, I got admission into BITS Pilani, but then I didn't like, for whatever reason, that's a long story. So I moved to doing my CA. I didn't have any commerce background, right? So I had to write a entrance exam within 3 months of deciding I'm going to join CA. So there was a teacher in Madurai who actually sat down and said that every accounting problem can be solved by putting a T format, and everything for which there is a right, there is a wrong. So I apply that to every business logic. If you look at the root cause of that problem, put a T mark, you will find the solution on the other side. That's the way I will look at it.
Hello, good evening, sir. My name is Arjit. So my question is related to, there are different current affair topic, or there are different newspaper, website and all, where you can get knowledge about current affairs, different thing that is happening. So like I am coming from a background where I have spent 2 or 3 years of my life just focusing on ITJ and all. But we also know that there are some other thing that also varies. So I want to know how you keep up with different current affairs. What is your newspaper routine? What are the different websites that you follow?
So there are, I think, 2 types of, I would call it, knowledge. And just to keep up with what's happening regularly, obviously, yes, I do read all the newspapers. In fact, I am obsessed with reading physical newspapers. So I am the old world technologically challenged person of not being able to read on my phone. Yes, I do read on my phone, but not regularly enough. In fact, for me, I feel more comfortable with the physical. But I think the way I would look at it again is slightly different. For when you start, as you are evolving in your life journey, you quickly realize if a particular issue happens, how does it cut across, which impinges either on your life or on your business logic. And invariably you will find that over a period of time you will know what to discard and what to take into cognizance. So for me, the way I do it is, because I don't have enough time. I mean, if I'm say a president today, I don't even have time to read a newspaper, but I will still make sure I go through what I call, what I believe is relevant from that point of view. Some obviously you do out of interest, but for knowledge purposes, I think you will quickly learn what you need to hold, what you need to discard. And your brain cannot hold everything, therefore you will need to learn how much to discard of what you read. So the way I do it is that whenever I find something which I believe is going to help me learn, I would spend my time reading about it in full detail. I can't actually skip things. I prefer to read every line of it. But where I feel it's not relevant, I won't spend time looking at it at all. That call, I think over experience you will build. Websites, I don't read, to tell you the truth, not because of anything, because each person's colored opinion then comes. You want to look at it from a facts perspective.
Good evening, sir. How can CII support the students of IIT Madras?
So we were just discussing right now about how we could do that from two different perspectives. See, CII role is actually very varied, right? It is representing not just one sector of industry, it is representing various sectors of industry. And if you look at from the approach of each member of CII, each of their, I mean, if I run my business, I'm more worried about my business. When I become CII office bearer, then I think about CII. Otherwise, I'm a member of CII. So what is really the strength of CII is being able to bring this large set of membership base we have, both large and small scale companies, and bring them to the table to be able to get access to what, let us say, IIT Madras is doing or any IIT is doing. I mean, we know the easy solution is to recruit talent from here, but that is not really, I think for IIT it doesn't matter, right? So for what matters is how do we really add value to bring in newer research points, newer thought processes. As we discussed, I think startups being supported. How do we make sure we have a kind of a semi-informal partnership of working with not the institute alone, but with the institute through to all of you. So that's how I see this evolving. Unfortunately, it's not like you snap your fingers and it's going to happen. So the process is starting. I think as CII, we have already been engaged with many industry, with many academia in different levels. With IIT, I think we have to be humble because I think there is also a lot of significant knowledge here. We have to make sure we use that to tap it.
You're saying about in being flexible enough to club up with partners and all, right? So by this we mean we are involving more people in our decision making of our company. So one of the concern might be we might reach a point where we have to compromise on the core values on which we started up whatever the company we have started. How did you reach that situation ever? How did you tackle with that?
Beautiful question. Yes, I have faced that situation many times, and I can tell you with hand on my heart that I never compromised our values. What you will learn to compromise on is outcomes, not on values, right? So if I look at it, I used to call it as a freedom within a framework. That framework is your value. You cannot go beyond that framework. But within that framework, you can have a lot of, it's like a football field, right? So you can play wherever you want within the football field. You can't go outside the football field and play. So values is one, capital utilization is one, and when I mean values, like I keep repeating, it is making sure every action of yours you bear in mind, is it going to benefit any one of your stakeholders? There will be conflicting issues between your stakeholders, that you have to take a call. That's why you are an entrepreneur, that's why you are a CEO. But if you are going to sacrifice your values, I can tell you there is no tomorrow. Every business which sacrifices its values sees an end in itself very quickly.
Sir, you said like 99.6% of the startups be like merging up with some companies or like selling out there. Like how can we be the 0.6% which can like influence the layer?
So that's why I said you have to bear in mind three elements to it, right? The financial side of it gets taken care of so that you start generating enough, I would call it returns, to be able to justify raising more equity or value. Second is that you are bearing in mind that the business you are doing. So let me step back and say this upfront. I think the biggest challenge I have faced when I look at every startup with whom you interact with is they start slavering, I told you. They start looking at the problem in pieces. That then, so I am going to be an online player. I am going to buy market share. How long will you do that? So ultimately you will need an offline presence. So you go and partner with somebody for that offline presence. Or you become large enough to be able to acquire that offline presence. And Amazon does that, right? Goes and buys whole food. So if you look at from pure knowledge perspective, all of us will have enough of knowledge. To convert that knowledge into what I would call financial sense is what will enable you be that 0.4%.
Sir, you told that larger companies generally acquire smaller ones to switch their business, but you also said that you like to retain the people and their skills already there. But as a company, you would also have a different direction to where you want to go. So is there ever a clash that you faced, or how did you handle that?
So that is a continuous dichotomy you have, right? Because what I would call inertia, which all of you know about from a science side of it, in the people side of it is even more harder, right? So that change is the biggest problem. And the hardest part for an entrepreneur is to know when to let go of the inertia, when to let go of those who are actually pulling you behind. And I don't think you should have any qualm in taking that call. And if you don't, so, I go back to pardon me for coming to a Bhagavad Gita example, but I just say if you want your whole body to function, sometimes you have to amputate something. So that's the only solution which you will have to live with from that perspective. So there will come a time when the person who actually helped you grow the business to, I'm just giving an example, X crores, may have to be let go when you are 10x. No hard feelings, nothing against that person. It is just inability to allow that company to scale up beyond that level. So maybe I will be the person to be let go because I am stopping the business from growing. I should know when to step away.
Myself, Suresh. Business is a vast subject. So how to choose a worthy partner, because alone cannot manage the things, right? So how to choose a worthy partner in the business?
If you want me to give an honest answer, luck. But what you can try and do is, so at least I have been, I would call it, I go maybe 50% by instinct, 30% by the connect with which I have with the person, he or she, meaning the conversations you hold, and then I would say 20% is luck. But frankly, you will actually quickly realize whether it is working or not. This is like much more different than a marriage or anything like that, right? Because you are not actually meeting individual to individual. You are working together, you have a common shared value, you have a common goal. So maybe let me rephrase that answer. I keep saying this, alignment in the goals. If you have alignment in the goals, most partnerships work. You may hate each other, but you will still be successful as business partners because you have got the alignment in goal. What happens typically is if there is no alignment in goal, that's when you have to say goodbye. So this qualm question, I mean the letting go of people I mentioned is where the alignment stops, because somebody else says it's too risky to do. And you are saying I have to do it because that's for the future of this business. At that point the partnership stops. So I go back to the point, sentence I used of humility, right? So you have to be in this learning journey almost throughout, right? So for me, I learned it by watching others. Right? I learned it by actually getting critiqued. So the first thing I did was, I was lucky to get two mentors. One was a professor from Harvard, and another was a retired consultant. And I used to actually spend time with them, and their job used to be to critique me like crazy. They will sit for 2 hours or 3 hours and say, these are all the things you're doing wrong. First time they did it, I actually felt very, very upset, because I thought, other than my parents, nobody else had kind of, given me such dressing down in terms of what you're doing wrong. But then I realized that as long as I internalize it as a learning for me and not as a criticism of me, that's why I corrected my word to say critique, then you will actually find that you get into a better state of being able to accept and understand how you deal with it. But other than examples, I don't think there is any other way by which you can actually learn. The book knowledge you can learn of dealing with people, etc. I mean, you can talk all about the HR theories, but ultimately it is about knowing what you are saying to an individual at that point of time and your temperament. That's why the humility comes in.
I'm Falgun. I have two questions. First is that you talked about mentorship right now, and I am actually a budding entrepreneur and in the Nirman, which is the pre-incubator of IIT Madras. So there are a lot of questions that comes up in work every day, like small questions that you don't know the right answers about, and if you do analysis, we don't know even more. So in that particular scenario, like how should I go about seeking out for mentorship or even on a personal level analysis? And the second question is, are there any particular books that you have found out across your journey that have really helped you, or any ones that stand out according to you?
So it's a very important point you're making here, and in fact that's what we were discussing just a little while ago in terms of how do we actually support the startup ecosystem. And if you really look at it, as I said, financing is what everybody looks at, but in reality that mentorship becomes a very crucial point. And while I did mention that we had a mentor here, there will be very many days on which you don't know the right answer to your problem. And the only way by which you can solve it is by continuously documenting your learning. So even if you have a mentor, they are not going to be holding your hand every day. Like you said, at 6 p.m. You can't call him and say, give me a solution for tomorrow, right? So I would say the solution is not a mentor. The solution is being able to cross-apply what a mentor may have told you for X problem to ABC problem. And that comes only with experience and practice. That's why I would say the early stage entrepreneurship is always very difficult. From a book perspective, I'm not a great reader, so I don't read that much as I should. But from a learning perspective, for me, the best learning for me was Execution by Ramcharan. Because the level of, I would call it simplicity with which you look at, that's why I said the T model. If you can make sure you can find solutions for executing a thing well, that's what will differentiate you as you scale your business. And that's true even from a startup to a large scale business.
I think one thing that holds back a lot of people, especially when if you're a high profile student or a high profile executive or any of this, is the fear of failure. And many people much as they may be high profile otherwise or high achievers otherwise, are very, if I may, for lack of a better word, very poor at dealing with failures and inability to kind of deal with the stress that comes along with it, right? As an entrepreneur, I'm sure that during the last several years of your journey, you too would have faced a couple of, failures here and there and other stuff. So how does one deal with, how did you deal with some of those things and came out of this and bounced back and like achieved more, and how does one deal with failures in this journey?
Beautiful question, and it's not one or two. I would say there have been many failures I have had. And I can tell you what happens. Your stomach churns, you feel like you're vomiting, you feel like not being able to speak. You say, why did I make all these stupid steps to, come here and start this journey? It can be as simple as, a big mistake which you make to your entire reputation being at stake, right? So if you ask me, there is no easy way out of it. You have to squarely face that problem, go to sleep, wake up next morning and work your way through the solution. So that for me is actually the strength of character of a true entrepreneur. How many failures you face, mud on your face, as I said, people looking at you and saying you're an idiot, all of it you will hear, but have the courage and conviction that the next day you can still find the solution and go ahead and make that happen. Having said that, I think we should also I gave the example of the IT services company. In fact, I would say in the first phase of my life, I would have exited 3 businesses. I'm talking about three-way supply chain, which was actually my 4th business. So, but the good thing was you managed to exit with the least harm to every stakeholder. We didn't lose money for ourselves, except I personally lost money, but we didn't lose money for any of our other stakeholders. So if you go back and look at it, the solution is have the courage and conviction and the ability to walk away when you know it's an irretrievable solution, but make sure you have enough safeguards built so that you're only harming yourself and not others. But I don't think there is any easy solution to fear of failure, because that's all of us go through it every day. And if you don't have that mental strength, I would say don't be an entrepreneur.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You're part of faculty member here. Thanks for very nice, eye-opener for the answers here. I have a question that, I'm sure you are in talks with IIT for possible collaborations, but in general, as part of TBS and as CII fraternity, how do you think, the academia and industry can come together? How we can bridge the gap? Like in day-to-day things, not necessarily projects or internship collaborations. Like, we see such collaborations in developed countries, where industry and academia come together, in various facets of activities.
I mean, again, it's a very fascinating subject. There is no one solution. But I think in reality, if you ask me, at least the academia whom I have interacted with, whether they were technical or business management people, I think what I have actually benefited from is their perspectives which they are given to me. So I think whether as CII or as I would call it, one way is to make sure academia and industry actually exchange roles. So you become a teacher, you become a business guy and I become a teacher, I think is the best solution you can have, where they get practical exposure of what one is going to face from a business perspective. So that's something which I think from CII side we are trying to work on to make it a tangible value, not I would call it intangible partnership which we generally speak about. And frankly, if you ask me, I'm glad many of you are sitting here and I know some of them have already left. Actually, I find that it is very difficult to hear somebody and practice it unless I start applying it in my mind as to what solution I am going to apply it for. The same applies for somebody teaching me. I used to say, this Harvard professor, I will go and tell him, I have this problem, I'm trying to enter this country and I'm not able to find a solution. He will tell me, he will suddenly start talking about Samsung doing something in Korea. And first few times I thought, oh my God, why am I wasting my time here? He's coming and telling me something about Samsung in Korea while I'm asking him my problem in Germany. Then I realized he was not wanting to give me a solution. He was wanting me to find the solution. The example he was giving was only to make me think as to how I could find the solution myself. So I think that's the example I would give of, because he said, I'm not a business guy, I'm only an academic teacher. But what I do know is that you will find a solution if you think this way.
How to identify a niche that we can build upon?
So please don't use the word niche, right? That's what I told you. Identify a problem and then go with a solution for that problem. And if you look at it as a niche, typically, as I said, you won't be able to be successful because that's a too small area for somebody to focus on, and you won't have enough customers to get to. So if you really want to look at a problem which you have as a customer or a user or whatever it is, I'll give you a simple example. You go and check in. You find how long it takes for a system to do, right? That is how all the IT companies started doing these 5-second, 10-second solutions, right? So you find a problem, you will find a solution. So rather than think of it as a niche, think of it as a problem and what can you do as a solution which will be different. And that, again I repeat, that's what I meant. It has to add value not only to the person who is going to use the product, but also everybody else who is associated with that product or with that service. So if I take supply chain as an example, I'll give you. People used to sell transportation, right? People will say, I have so much warehousing space, and sell it. What did we say? We said that I don't own a warehouse, I don't own a truck. So let me find out what is the best solution for you as a customer in terms of saying that if I transport from, say, Pune to Delhi, I do it in a truck faster, or maybe you shouldn't be located at Pune, you should have a warehouse which is located at Nagpur. I'm just giving an example. If I did that planning solution for you, that's where I add value to you. That even today it differentiates us from many of our large competitors, because people tend to say, I have transport, I have a warehouse, and I need to fill my truck from Pune to Delhi, so let me get more business for that. So I'm identifying a problem for the customer rather than saying I have a solution.
Take on this software and IT sector. See, there is lots of craze about software. Even most of the youth is going for software jobs only. At the same time, we are seeing more layoffs also. Microsoft and Twitter, such companies are laying off the jobs. So what are your findings from your experience? And do you say that it is a trustful sector to proceed with?
See, the way I would look at it is slightly different. Today, there's no company in the world which does not actually have IT or software or digital solutions built into every activity they do, right? So there is no way you're going to escape that. Are you going to be doing a software development? That's a different call. So if you ask me, is there I'm very strongly against saying choose one sector versus another sector. I think it depends on what you like doing and will there be a future in that sector or not. For all you know, if you are in that sector and you are doing a good job, you may get a job in some other sector. That's why I said my classmate who was in IIT, I think he was fairly very high rank also in IIT. He, I think, moved out into McKinsey. Within 2 years, he was in Providence Private Equity. So private equity to engineering, I don't see any link at all. But you are good at your job, you will like what you do, you will get there. So ultimately, in fact, the only thing I tell people who ask me what career I should choose is like what you do. That's all that matters. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dinesh. On behalf of the entire community at IIT Madras, kindly allow me to express our sincere gratitude to you for such a wonderful, insightful discussion and an amazing evening. And with all humility, kindly allow me to say this: the wealth of experience and the wisdom that you bring to the table is truly inspirational, and I'm sure that the students learned quite a bit. We had a very interesting set of questions and a very engaging discussion. I'm very happy about that. Thank you to the entire CII team, Mr. Ashish, Mr. Jayesh, Mr. Shivek, all of you for visiting IIT Madras campus and spending time with us.